Hello, everyone, and welcome to A New Direction. My name is Jay Izzo, and oh my gosh, do we have a great show for you. I am telling you right now, it's an outstanding show. Holy cow. Listen, here's the deal, right? How many of you out there either have been, are, or know someone who is burned out in their job? Anybody out there? Okay, all right. So who's responsible for it? What? Would you just ask, Jay? No. I mean, because typically what we have a tendency to do, right? I'm a business owner, right? But typically as business owners or managers, right? I'm on LinkedIn a lot, right? And I read a lot about how people complain about their employees. They're not motivated. They're not engaged, right? And they want to blame individual factors, right? But when you start thinking about it, that's an awful lot of blame that we put on an individual. How much is the business or the organization, profit or nonprofit, how much are they responsible for that? How much responsibility are you willing to take? That's an interesting question, isn't it? Right. Well, listen, I'm going to tell you what, today's show is absolutely outstanding. I have Dr. Mia Russell, who's going to join us here in a little bit. And she and Dr. Gervin Liggins wrote this outstanding book called Fired Up. It's absolutely fantastic. A guide to transforming your team from burnout to engagement. Who does not want their team to be more engaged? Is there anybody who does not want to raise their hand? Okay, all right, good. All right, I'm going to tell you what, she's going to be fantastic. She's absolutely brilliant. The book is amazingly written. You're going to enjoy her a lot. Before we get started, let's do what we do every week, which, by the way, fits in within her book. It's kind of interesting. You know, every week I talk about that we are 4-part people. We're physical, mental, emotional, spiritual people. And that if we're not working on ourselves every single day, the truth of the matter is we don't stay static. We're either growing or we're dying. That's the truth. And interestingly, there's some research in here that Dr. Russell and Dr. Liggins point to that suggests we're actually 8-part people. That moves beyond that, which is interesting, right? They include some other elements. But I'm going to look at 4, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And I'm going to ask you on a scale of 1 to 10 to evaluate yourselves out there, wherever you're listening, wherever you're watching, right? And thank you for watching us on DBTV all over the world. Appreciate you being with us. And also, those of you who listen to us on podcast later, thank you. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being this area of my life is awful, 10 being this area of my life couldn't get any better, how would you rate yourself physically? So if you were to think about your exercise, eating right, getting enough sleep, which is important, not being burned out, by the way, all these things are, drinking enough water, being hydrated, how would you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, 5 being average? Now listen, whatever your number is, that's okay. All right? Because that's your starting place of where you're going to jump from, where you're going to improve. Right? So whatever that number is, it is. So you got that first number, right? Okay, that's first number. Second number is your mental intellectual number. And that's about your intellectual growth. Right? Now, if you're listening to the show, that's awesome. It's part of your intellectual growth because you're growing in knowledge and understanding and wisdom in what you're doing and in your work, right? And in learning about yourself. But you want to be an active participant in that. So you should be reading. You should be doing other things that you're actively participating in to grow your mental knowledge, right? Reading a book, say, Fired Up, would be an excellent way to improve your intellectual and mental area. So how would you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 there? Okay, good. It's 2 numbers. Third is the emotional element. And really simply, here's how you could break it down. Daniel Goleman has done a beautiful job of talking about emotional intelligence and emotional quotients. Here's where we break it down to. 1, how well are you able to control your emotions under stress and pressure? And 2, how well are you able to tap into and truly understand the emotions of other people? By the way, that's such a critical aspect to avoiding burnout in your people. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself? Right, that's 3 numbers. And the 4th area is the spiritual area. And you know what? We get really confused about this, but the truth is we all live by faith. The fact of the matter is you took a sip of coffee, wasn't poisonous. Guess what? Because you believed it wasn't going to be poisonous. You put your key in the car, you turned it on, and it started. And why? Because you had faith that it would start, right? You walk across the street, the sign says walk. You have faith that when you walk across the walkway, that the car's not going to hit you because it says walk, right? That's faith, right? The truth of the matter is, what gives you a place of centeredness and peace in the midst of chaos, because it can happen. Is that God? Is it nature? Is it something else? Right? And then the question, is it working? And what might you need to do to change it? All right. So what's that number for you spiritually? Those 4 numbers are like the air in the tires of your car. Right? And here's the deal with the air and tires of your car. If you think about the air and the tires of your car, right? If one tire is too low, what happens? The car veers the whole time, right? And at the same time, if all 4 tires are too low, what happens? The car doesn't work efficiently. It doesn't work effectively. And over time, guess what you're going to do? You're going to burn out the tires. See what I did there? Right? Speaking of someone who's got all the air in her tires up to the right level and absolutely at the right height, her name is Dr. Mia Russell. She has over 20 years of experience in business and finance. As a lecturer at Center for Leadership Education, she brings her knowledge and expertise to managing personal and finances, managing personal and finance course. Dr. Russell is personal finance subject matter expert and has served in various roles across nonprofit, academic, and corporate centers. She's currently at Johns Hopkins University. She has also published a number of articles on financial education, leadership, and organizational behavior literature, and that add to our knowledge of personal financial management tools, health insurance literacy, burnout, and employee engagement. She's absolutely fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show. Welcome to the first time, Dr. Mia Russell. Dr. Russell, welcome to A New Direction.
Thank you, Coach Jay. I'm happy to be here.
All right. So let's just dig right in here to this awesome book, which I really enjoyed. And let's just at least right now, let's talk a little bit about burnout, because I think we do need to talk about what it is. I know that you and Dr. Ligas talk about it's a global phenomenon, but what is it when we talk about burnout? What are we talking about?
So I'd like to take that a different way.
Okay.
We often talk about what burnout is, but maybe let's start with what it isn't first.
Oh, I love that.
Right? It's not simply in someone's head. You know, we're hearing about it all the time. It's not just a resiliency deficit in the way that you talk about your wellness will. It's not just emotional exhaustion or physical exhaustion. It's not just feelings of anxiety or overwhelm, frustration, or merely fatigue or just depression, but it really is this kind of construct of 3 important areas that has to do with how we engage from an energy, involvement, and efficacy perspective. And that's what we talk about in the book. And so burnout is really created from emotional exhaustion. It similar, right, to that your flat tire, right? When the car isn't working well, it starts to weigh in on those other aspects of the car, right? And so we build some level of cynicism, right? And then we have this professional, what we call inefficacy or lack of professional accomplishment, right? Then we start to have these ideas and thoughts of these self-doubts about our contribution to work. So those 3 things working together is really what stalls our enjoyment with work and our performance. So I think I'd like to talk about burnout in that context.
I think it's great. I mean, you do talk. I agree with you. I love that because you actually have a little subheading about what it's not. And but you had some warning signs. I'm just going to mention a few that you and Dr. Liggins wrote about in the book, right? Tension in the body. There's because I just want people to hear these, because if they have some of these symptoms, they at least need to. It may not all be burnout, but maybe perhaps there's something out there, and I'd like to at least help them, if you don't mind. This is what you wrote: tension in the body, headaches, muscle aches, gastrointestinal issues, shortness of breath, restlessness, fatigue, irritability, anxiety, insomnia, anger issues, difficulties communicating, withdrawal from or withdrawing interactions with others. Those are some of the things that are warning signs that you give, and you make it really clear. And of course, what you talked about is those 3 particular areas. So I want to talk about those 3 areas, because one of the things that you talk about that helps us avoid burnout is having meaning in our work. And you ask a really, really great question that I'd like to have you just follow up on. And that is, what gets you up and going in the morning? How does meaning in our work contribute or so into maybe avoiding burnout?
Yeah, I think it's meaning and purpose, right? Having um, this feeling absorbed, right? Dedicated to our work, having some feelings of commitment. That drives us, right? These are drivers of motivation, and in essence, uh, that's kind of what we all want, right? We want to be motivated to work, motivated by work, and when I say we, it's like employees, but also leaders and organizations also want motivated people. So this idea of meaning and purpose, uh, that's what we all talk about, right? Finding your why. It
Mhm.
is uh, the pun intended, right? It is what fires us up.
Right.
And yes, and so I think the the idea of meaning and purpose is really what we're all seeking.
That's so agree. I love a quote that you have in this book, which is, "What is more expensive than motivating your employees? Not motivating them." And motivation is, I went to grad school, psychology, and motivation is a really hard concept to really understand. Help us, if you can, wrap our mind around motivation a little bit.
Sure. So when we think about motivation or kind of harnessing motivation, this is something that we're all very familiar with because it doesn't matter what type of project or goal, what the types of things that we have been pursuing. We all have uh, tried to figure out those types of things
Mhm.
that drive us, right? And so we know motivation matters, and it matters from an organizational perspective. We see that when you have motivated team, you have higher levels of profitability, greater resources, higher levels of morale. Um, when we think about ways that we can increase motivation, which might be helpful for your listeners now, right, is uh, kind of really celebrating those small wins, celebrating any type of goal achievement, recognizing progress, defining purpose in your work, right? And that is a key to increasing motivation. One area that we've kind of found is related to both life satisfaction and goal achievement is this idea of recognizing what you have control over and what you and not, right? And so this idea or recognition of uh, your span of control is also very important. um, Small things like planning micro breaks, right? So small breaks, and this doesn't mean a vacation at necessarily, but it could be stepping outside and enjoying nature for a little bit. These are the types of things that keep us going. Um, and also things like shaping your environment, or that might mean bringing nature into your environment or engaging in high impact activities. Typically we used to talk about high impact activities as exercise, but it's also things that you just mentioned, right? Those intellectual stimulation. These are ways that we can kind of drive motivation, and by increasing motivation we can it essentially helps us to reach our goals.
Mm. You and Dr. Liggins link motivation and engagement together, and I found that fascinating in the book about engagement, because we all want engaged employees. Who doesn't want an engaged employees? But let's talk. Can we talk a little bit about engagement and what we're trying to accomplish there in terms of an engaged employee, and how we affect engagement in terms of leadership and in our business environment?
Sure. So let's start with what is engagement, right? And it is really, we don't think about burnout and engagement as this um, kind of linear process, but we also talk about it in the book as it's kind of two sides of a coin, or right, the opposite sides of a sword. And so when we think about engagement, it's those things that burnout is not, right? It's when an employee is absorbed into their work, right? They are fully engrossed, enjoying the type of work that they do. They're dedicated to their work, but they also have this vigor, right? This zest and zeal around work. Those are the three elements of engagement. And when we have those, we really see, you know, tremendous positive organizational outcomes. Uh, uh, People stay at, our retention issues are kind of no longer an issue, right? People are more willing to stay at their employer. They have collegial relationships with coworkers. Profitability increases. All types of positive outcomes are associated with that. And so this is the reason why we want engaged employees. On the flip side, we know that burnout costs organizations billions of dollars, right? I think when our in a book we talk about, I think it's 2019 data, $300 billion could be attributed to burnout. And when you add in lost productivity, that could top $1 trillion globally. So for these reasons, trying to help your team address issues that um, have negative impact and try to move them towards engagement. Uh, that's why it's really important.
I, first of all, this I want people to understand that you and Dr. Liggins, this is part of a research project that you have done,
Mhm.
correct?
Yes, yes.
Right. This is all this. So this isn't just an opinion. You both have researched this extensively, and have done this massive research on this subject matter. So I want people to understand that what Dr. Russell is talking about here is such in-depth research, which was what makes for me made this book absolutely fantastic. In chapter 3, which is entitled "Your Work Environment and Well-Being: The Surroundings Tell the Story," is the subheading. How does work environment play a role in the burnout, either in burnout or reducing burnout?
Yeah, so we think the work environment is really work, right? Like it is the place that you go, and it has everything to do with the uh, kind of the actions and what you do, right? So we talk about the work environment in three ways. We have what we call the OJP framework, right? It's organizational, job related, and personal. And we believe that all people should um, work in an environment that's positive, uh, thriving, flourishing, and effective, right? We believe this is what employees deserve. And so it is important to examine or understand the work environment at these three levels because all the things that we're talking about, burnout and engagement, they're really complex issues. And there's not one thing in one area that you can, there's not one lever to pull in an area, right?
Right.
And so when we think about the work environment, it really encompasses uh, every aspect of where you go, what you do, who you do it with, and those pieces are really critical to organizational success, but also our personal success.
I one of the things that caught my eye in the work environment was, and I just know that we don't think about it in most organizations, but we don't think about the physical environment very much, and in terms of how it really can affect us. Can you talk about the importance of really having a good physical environment in
Yeah.
helping reduce burnout?
Yeah. So, we've, the research supports that what we might, as you alluded to, what we might think is a small issue like lighting, is something that actually affects us. We know it, but we might not think about it in the work context, right? We definitely think about it at home. Um, so things like lighting or appropriate space, right? Do you have space for deep thinking, right? Some organizations now have huddle rooms or small conference rooms. Is there a space that supports the work and the employees and their needs? Um, some it's A lot of this is also about aesthetics, right? So, what are some of the things that might create a more pleasant environment? We know it when we see it, but we don't often think about it.
Mm.
Imagine if there were plants all around in a lobby or something. It gives you a certain feeling. We talk about houses and curb appeal, right? There are certain things that can be done that can make things more aesthetically pleasing. These are uh, kind of inexpensive ways to create a better environment, especially from a physical aspect, as you mentioned.
That's awesome. Her name is Dr. Mia Russell. The book is entitled "Fired Up: A Guide to Transforming Your Team from Burnout to Engagement." She's absolutely outstanding. You're listening to her here on A New Direction. Hey, folks, Epic Physical Therapy, one of my physical therapists, and uh, I'm just going to tell you something. They work with professional athletes and they work with people like you and me. But here's the thing that they're going to do: they're going to design a customized treatment program that is specific towards you. So listen, when you're ready for your epic relief, your epic recovery, your epic results, don't look any further. Go to epicpt.com. That's epicpt.com. And Linda Craft Team Realtors, for over 38 years, they have been helping people all over the world transition in life. You say, well, they're a real estate company. But the truth of the matter is, if you think about it, every place that you've ever lived has been a transition in life, whether it's an apartment or whether it's a home, your first home, right? It's a transition. Whether you're downsizing or whether you're going into a larger home, it's a transition in life. They want to help you do that in the least stress environment, and they want to do that and reduce the time that it takes to do that. So when you're ready to reduce your stress when it comes to your next transition, when it comes to selling a home or buying a home, start with Linda Craft Team Realtors. That's lindacraft.com. That's LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with Dr. Mia Russell, her book co-written, Fired Up, Guide to Transforming Your Team from Burnout to Engagement. One of the things you make mention of is we're talking about the environment that we're in, and you spent a lot of time talking about the important role that trust plays in the environment.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about trust, because you spent a lot of time there.
Yeah, I think probably one of the most concise things to say is trust is foundational to any relationship. And so, we think about our work relationship as any other, right? Without trust, how do we get to these other aspects, right? We talk about in an ideal work environment, we need trust, fairness, and respect. But it really must start with trust. And trust is about, um, this knowing that you can talk to a manager or peers, right? That there may be confidence, there may be some vulnerability, right? Trust is about really knowing one another, um, uh, really knowing that you can count on one another. I think these things are, or this idea about trust broadly is essential in life, but it also is very important at work and with those that we work with.
Well, you made an interesting connection here between trust, thriving, which you define as a source of competitive advantage, and and vitality, which is about energy, and then you include learning. Can you kind of help us put that together between thriving, vitality, and learning? How that because trust seems to play an extraordinary role in those three areas.
Yeah, so we believe that, and I say we believe, but also research supports, and kind of we've made some some um, some leaps here, right? The idea is that where we have trust based relationships, people can flourish, right? People can learn, they can grow. They have the support that they need for those, opportunities. But it really all starts with trust. When we think about an employee, an employer, or leader, manager, organization relationship, employees need to be comfortable to ask for what they need. Employees need to know that leaders are there and are there to support them, right? That they will provide opportunities for them. This is when we think about learning, vitality, thriving, and flourishing, we are thinking about an employee truly being their best self at work, not just bringing their best self, right? With we spend 60% of our waking of our lives at work. This is a place where we do contribute, but we also should be poured into. And so we believe that these are with trust, employees can truly, um, be their best selves.
Well, you talk about the type of work environments, and you talk about positive work environment, effective work environments, and then thriving and flourishing work environments. And I'm just going to throw out a few things that you said here, and if you want to expand on any one of these, please do so. You talk about in thriving and flourishing, having fair treatment at work, having a manageable workload, making sure that they have role clarity, being effective in your communications, management support, knowing that they're being supported by management, and then having reasonable time pressure and expectations. And you bring in that one of the leading series is the job demands, the JDR theory. And do you want to talk about those in terms of how, if we're not paying attention to those particular issues, that we are contributing to the burnout?
Sure. So let me start with the theory, right? So job demands and resources theory essentially says that we have these two kind of forces working in a work environment, job demands and job resources, and they can work together um, for an environment that is kind of life giving or promotional, right? Or it can be draining. And when demands exceed resources, we can create an environment that is draining. When resources exceed demands, it is more, positive and promoting. Specifically, the theory talks about health promoting, which I think is interesting when we think about kind of, pouring into something and giving life to something. It is that work can do that for us with this purpose and meaning, right? So, job demands are classified as either hindrance demands or challenging demands. So, hindrance demands may be long hours or um, excessive workloads, things that are draining, or that, are really, really challenging to an employee. I want to be careful about the word challenging because now I'm going to say we also have challenging demands. Challenging demands are more like stretch goals.
Mm.
We always will have some stress, but there is, we talk about good stress or use stress, right? This thing that can propel us to act. So challenging demands work in the same way. These are, um, a special project that pulls on that leverages some of your strengths, or an opportunity to explore a new area of the business where you may not be as familiar but have some interest, right? It can support your learning, but it can also give you an opportunity to shine and thrive. So those are challenging demands, which are good, right? In a like moderate way, right? In a moderate way. Our job resources are all of these things that an organization brings to bear that helps us really get the work done, but also supports the person. So it's things like autonomy, right? It could look like volunteer opportunities to connect with the community or to help employees better find meaning and purpose in their specific role. That may look like flex. If you're talking about remote work, it may look like flex time or a more autonomy in their scheduling.
Mm.
It could look like, I'm sure we can come up with a laundry list of all of the types of things. This could be effective lighting, right? Or some of the aesthetic features we talked about. These are the things that can help, that add to the quality of the work environment. I think one thing, I know you want to say something, but one thing that's really important to understand is that demands have heavier weight in the work environment than resources. So while we want more resources, it's not like we can make it equal because the demands, things that drain us, have a more of a significant effect. And so it's more about balancing the demands and resources. Uh, often this has to do a lot with the specific role and the organization, right? So it's not like a one for one. In some ways, one one kind of hindrance demand may need three or four resources to counterbalance it, right? So it's more of a trying to find that right mix of demands and resources.
Ah, I see you bring clarity. I love that. That's awesome. This whole theory, this JDR theory, kind of now we get to jump to what you talk about, the uh I guess it's the OJP
Mhm.
framework,
Yes.
which is the three aspects levels of the workplace. And this is going to be critical as we talk about how we're going to build this framework out, I think. And so, can we give people an understanding of this organizational aspects, the job related aspects, and the personal aspects, and how they are characters of an ideal work environment?
Yes. And I touched on this a bit too, right? So uh, let's just specifically talk about burnout, or this really applies to any kind of organizational issue, right, or phenomena. And we know that it's a big thing. It's not like this, again, like this one lever can be pulled. Uh, there are organizational factors like policies, practices, um, programs, industry trends, right? Sometimes government regulations that affect the organization. We also have job related factors. These are things that really are related to the job, workload. Um, Perhaps employees have cogs in a specific system, uh, new practices or policies around certain technology, right? So these are the types of things that specifically affect the type of work. And then we talk about personal factors. And these things really don't have much to do with the work environment, except the idea that it's a realization that people bring baggage to work, right? People live real lives, and uh, sometimes there are challenges, right? Sometimes things are going on and they do affect their work, right? There is a thing called presenteeism, right? Because people can be at work but not engaged in their work, right? They might as well be absent. And so we want to think about uh, how are the when we think about the work environment, you want to think about organizational aspects, job related aspects, and personal aspects when you want to institute something new or when you want to evaluate something. I think we'll definitely talk about the kind of our framework, the three A's, right? But you ultimately want to be able to assess what is going on and in what aspect is there an issue, because you would want to if you want to solve it, you want to kind of take different approaches depending on the area of the work environment. For example, if it's a organizational issue, that's likely not a quick fix. If there's a policy issue, it may need to be escalated. It may need to go through multiple departments. It might be totally outside of your span of control. For small business owners, this would be somewhat different, right? You might be able to do all of these things, but perhaps you really don't know how to address the personal. Right. So I think thinking about what's going on from these three different levels is really important because it allows you to consider the complexity. This is not just a simple fix kind of issue.
So I so agree. You know, you and Dr. Liggins also make a really great distinction here, and I thought it was just so well written about this is what you say. You say every discussion of teams should start with the distinction that every team is made up of groups, but not every group is a team.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, I got to have you say something about that.
Yeah, so we really wanted to think, I guess help people think about what a team is, and it really is this group that is working together for a common goal, right? And this idea of common goal is very important. So whether we think about, however we think about um, concerns or even work in the that on our, with our teams and within the work environment, it's really important first to make sure that we all are on the same page, that we all have these uh, common interests in achieving this goal. And we need to think about how can we support the teams to give them what they need so that they can achieve these goals.
I'm just going to point out a few things. You talk about that we live in a VUCA world, and VUCA, VUCA, is a volatile, uncertain, conflicting, ambiguous world, and nobody would disagree with that. It certainly is. And you give a number of things that we need to consider within our organization, knowing that. And one was, negative conditions may already exist, which you've previously talked about. Technology is pervasive, and I just want to reemphasize, or if you wouldn't mind reemphasizing that, we have technology that allows us to be in contact with people 24/7. We have more people working remotely, but and people would like to think that those two things might not cause stress and lead to burnout, but in fact, that constant contact and the way our brains work in remote environments is really can contribute to burnout, can't they?
Yes, definitely. And when I mentioned absorption as one area of engagement, right, being so totally engrossed in work. But this slippery slope towards burnout occurs when we're so engrossed that we fail to detach, right? And we find that we saw this was an issue pre-pandemic, but now that your kitchen table or your, if you have a home office, right? If you don't, your sofa, all of these other areas become offices. Whether you have a work cell phone, we're so connected. We feel a need, at least in the U.S. context, we feel a need to be busy, be responsive. I think in some ways, this busyness is a badge of honor, right? We
Yeah.
feel like, you know, um, this is what we're supposed to do. Like we've achieved some major feat because we are always on. But uh, that absorption to the point that uh, it is hindering us is dangerous, right? And it negatively affects our well-being.
Yeah, you know, I don't, I don't think we're paying attention to the symptoms around us. I often feel, and we'll get to chapter 10 further down the road, but the truth of the matter is, I don't even know if we're paying attention to the symptoms within ourselves, right? I mean, I mean, I think some of us are in the midst of burnout, don't even realize we're in burnout, and so if we can't even be aware of it in ourselves, how are we going to be aware of it in other people, right? That's uh, that I think that's a problem. Would you not agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And in fact, we talk a little bit about being a burnout risk manager, and this idea that what we should be on the lookout for, these signs and symptoms. A lot of what we've already talked about, right? Fatigue, um, overwhelmed at work, not taking time off. I just posted on LinkedIn yesterday. It was January 31st. Is National Plan Your Vacation Day, right? And so how sometimes we get so wrapped up in what we are doing that we don't step back and we're not self-aware enough to make changes, right? We have all the tools, but sometimes we're just so busy dealing with the daily life, which is a challenge, right? I think we all are there, right? Um, but sometimes that is like a consequence of it.
Yeah. Yeah. You did some you've done some research here, and and I want to talk about some of the research that you've done with what you've shown about engaged employees. I'm just going to read some of the things that your research has discovered. Um, Organizations have consistent policies and practices. Uh, there is provides training, open and transparent communication, which we talked about a little bit, opportunities for career advancement, clear reporting structure, freedom to manage and structure work, manageable workload, which we've talked about, can act on values, can share opinions and perspectives, have opportunities for professional growth, likely to receive recognition. And then good working relationships, leaders value contribution, recognition, right? We don't really, we don't do a very good job of that, do we? In terms of our employees is
Yeah,
recognition.
I think that there is I think that's changing, but there is a sentiment that your salary or raises
Mm.
are the way that we demonstrate um, our appreciation and recognition. But sometimes, a thank you, a small token, a celebration during a team meeting, just to kind of uh, raise an idea or some small accomplishment goes a long way.
Her name is Dr. Mia Russell. The book is entitled Fired Up Guide to Transforming Your Team from Burnout to Engagement. And we're going to talk about her framework in this last segment coming up. You're listening to her here on A New Direction. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just say about Epic Physical Therapy. Listen, they have the most cutting edge equipment available. Some of my favorites are the Alter G anti gravity treadmill, the compression sleeves, the Game Ready, which is my favorite. I talk about it ad nauseum. They're trained and certified in the most comprehensive, cutting edge treatments available: blood flow restriction therapy, dry needling, cupping. And that's just a few. Listen, when you're ready for your epic relief, your epic recovery, your epic results, don't look any further. Look for epicpt.com. That's epicpt.com. And Linda Craft Team Realtors. Listen, they're helping people transition in life. Yes, it's real estate, but real estate is a life transition. They've often said that the largest personal investment you'll ever make is in a home, right? And that's a major life transition, and it's a major stress. Well, they want to take the stress out of that transition process for you, that part of it. So listen, when you're ready to reduce your stress in your next transition in life when it comes to selling or buying a home, start with Linda Craft Team Realtors. That's lindacraft.com. That's LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with Dr. Mia Russell. Are you enjoying this, by the way?
I am.
Good. I'm enjoying it. I feel like I'm just sitting at your feet, going to class with you, just kind of just going along, just learning, and I'm enjoying every bit of it. So I just want to say thank you because
You're a great student. You've read, you've had questions about the test. This is wonderful.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. All right, so let's dig into this. You have created we're actually chapter 6. It's entitled "Shifting from Burnout to Engagement." We've already talked a little bit about the organizational job, the OJP framework, organizational job personal framework. All right, so there's a 3-step process that we have to do here, right? So walk us through the 3-step process, and then let's talk about how we do each of these steps.
Sure. So the 3 steps are to assess, 1, to assess, number 2, to acknowledge, and 3, to act. And so when what you just read through was our assessment form,
Okay.
which is which are some of the key or let's say primary and predictive factors in a work environment that could lead to burnout and engagement. So autonomy, collegial relationships, policies and practices, right? Communication, transparency, all of these things are really important and have a direct impact on an employee's relationship with work. So when we talk about assessing the work environment, we're really saying, how do these things show up in the work environment, right? Do they show up? And in what ways might they show up? We have readers can go through and kind of think about that. We like to think about these factors in kind of three ways, right? They exist or they don't. And if they kind of exist, right? That's not really scientific to use kind of, but I think you understand.
You're
If they
good here.
if they kind of exist, then we want you to think about it as a warning sign, right? Something to keep your eye out on and for. Now, when we think about assessments, we also we want to not only think about those things that we should avoid or that are not present, right? And we don't want to only think about the negative aspect. We talked about how this is about finding an appropriate mix of demands and resources, and so it's about finding out what's working well and doing more of it, right? Like using that to propel us to do more and better in that area, as well as tackling those things that are problematic, right? If there is a new policy that has an entire team and the entire department kind of uh, all worked up, maybe you need to investigate why. Like, how is this executed or operationalized? In what ways is it really creating a problem for people? And so, again, we think about helpers, those things that are working well and you want to do more of, hindrances, and warning signs. Again, once we know what these are, then we can move to the second step, which is acknowledge.
Okay, can I just stop you for a quick second here because I want to give you some credit here for something
Okay.
that's in the book. Because you have these, don't you have? Don't I recall seeing the assessment forms here in the book?
Yes. Yes.
Right. So you have these assessments here. So I don't want people to think that they got to make something up. They're all in here.
Yes, we really wrote this book to be a true guide, right? That you could pick this up and you could kind of learn about what burnout is, why it's important, and then we didn't want to stop there, right? We want to say, so now let's do something about it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I just want to make sure that people understood that because there are these assessment forms, by the way, in this book, and then when we get through the next two steps, they've got the charts here how you can label this all out. So I just want to make sure people understood that. And let me ask you this real quickly before we go on to number two, acknowledge. Now, can people hire you to do
Yes.
these?
Yes.
Can they?
Yes.
Okay. So they can reach out to you and say, hey, Dr. Russell, I heard you here on a new direction. I'm really interested in doing this assessment. Can you guide us through this? They can actually hire you to do this.
Yes, we do some consulting. So yes, we can be reached at firedup.com or
Okay.
thinkfiredup.com. I'm sorry.
Okay. So I'm going to put that on the blog post
Okay.
to the show that they can reach out to you at thinkfiredup.com.
Yes.
And if you want to get more information about the assessing process and how to work through it, and they can guide you and consult you through that and coach you through it because I'm a coach fan. They could coach you through that, but I didn't want you to lose out on that possible revenue. I can be honest with you. I didn't want you to lose that. All right. So step one is assess. All right. So then where do we go from there?
So from there, we go to acknowledge. And this has a lot to do with understanding the current realities, right? So this is examining some of the internal and external factors that are prevalent and relevant. This may look like today, what is the impact of returning to work, right? Or what's the impact of how many days people will be in the office, right? Perhaps it is thinking about a mandate for 5 days in the office if it's not required, right? How might this impact our people? Certain things, right? When we think about external, certainly the pandemic, perhaps government regulations, industry trends, those are some of the things that are affecting us and we can't really change. But then we have these internal factors. Almost if we think about like a SWOT analysis, is the way that we thought about this. What are some of these things, these opportunities and threats that we should be aware of, right? And so that's what acknowledging is. It's really saying, okay, here's our helpers, our hindrances, even our warning signs. When we think about that, our context, what we have control over, what we may be able to influence, what should we work on? What is that thing? What is that factor or workplace condition that's worth us kind of fighting for, working on, right? It helps you to uh, create, in some ways, a prioritization of where we want to spend our time and energy to make the improvements in the workplace. We really want to think about what are those things that will have the most significant or important effect, sometimes just perceived important, right? It may be something that is not even expensive, but it goes a long way. For example, recognition program, right? So, third step, ready for that?
Yeah, yeah,
All
yeah.
right. So then we go to the third step. And the third step is really about understanding, uh, given what we know, what's working, what isn't, and what we kind of need to keep our eye on, what we have control over, what types of strategies can we put into place, and in what ways. And this is where that OJP framework, the organization, job related, and personal, come back into play. So if there is a communication or transparency issue, let's just use this as an example. Uh, how might we address that organizationally, specific at the job level? And is there a way to address that on a personal level, right? If we want to think about a new telework policy, how might we think about it again in those three different levels? We may be able to do something at each level, which would give us an even more significant impact, right? And it shows, again, even if perceptions are reality, it will show a stronger commitment to the issue. And that's just one example, but certainly we have hundreds of strategies listed in the book. To your point about that, we really did create this to be a guide. So you could pick this up, work your way through some issues, and we give you some ideas. And we don't kind of purport that it's we have all the answers. And but we did look at various industries, various roles of things that have worked. Right, this is also evidence based, but it might not work in a what works in a hotel or hospitality industry may not work in a transportation field. But there may be some, at least it might stimulate some thinking. Oh, that's an interesting idea. How might I put a spin on that? And so that's what these three steps do. They really help you to go through, identify, and estimate what's happening, right? Again, what's working, what isn't. And then we walk you through a process where you can actually put together an action plan that uh, is kind of realistic and something that you can execute, we think, immediately.
Right. Yeah. No, no. And you do. You accomplish that in here. But I want to something that you said in chapter 9, which is step 3, act, by the way, is brick by brick build a plan. And you say this really clearly right at the very beginning. Remember that this is an iterative process. And you've just mentioned some strategies will work, others won't, but it's important that you try different strategies for the benefit of the team.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we don't. We also believe that this is hard work, right? Like this is hard work.
Yeah.
We could be talking about changing culture, right?
Right.
It may not just be one small thing, right? It could be something really significant, but it's worth it,
Right. And
and it will pay exponential benefits in having a cohesive, again, pun intended, fired up team, right? And
right.
so it's worth. That's the reason why you do it, because it's worth it.
Well, and you talk about even a small change is extraordinarily right. Don't overlook the small changes because they're extraordinarily important, right?
Yes, exactly. Right.
Yeah. That I think that's something that people don't. Sometimes we look for such big changes, but you're saying, listen, if you can move a little bit, you're just. I think what is it? What is it that you? What's the name of the subtitle? I think it's called rinse and repeat or something like that. I think is like right. You just keep working with it. Keep working with it. It's not a one-time thing. It's really what you're saying.
I think kind of societally, we think that everything has to be a huge transformational change, but people win in incremental improvements, right? Like incremental change is acceptable. It isn't just it is something to still be proud of.
Right. That's beautiful. Well, we've done an hour. What do you think of that?
That was fast.
Well, you talk about in the book that when, you know what, when you're engaged and you're motivated, time goes quickly, doesn't it?
I would like to make one comment though.
Sure, absolutely.
Our
Yeah.
last chapter is all about, we didn't want to spend too much time on uh, talking about, self-care broadly speaking. But we did think, because there are tons of books devoted to that, but we did really find that leaders told us, you know, I'm trying to help my team address burnout, but I'm feeling the same way myself. And
Mm.
so we did feel that it was necessary to at least say, don't forget yourself, right? This is the idea of putting your mask on when we're on a plane, right? And you've got to do that as well. And also, like, being kind to yourself, right? We're making mistakes, we're all learning how to operate in this new work environment, this new world. And it's just really important to kind of think about these things that we're talking about in the context of your team, those people that you may work with, but also how it might be affecting you personally.
Yeah, and all of chapter 10 is devoted to it, and it's actually so beautifully written, and you both did an amazing job. So tell people how they can get a hold of you if they would like to gather more information. You
Yes,
already
so our website is thinkfiredup.com. That's THINK, fired, FIREDUP, thinkfiredup.com. I'm on LinkedIn, and I welcome any of your listeners to connect with me. I'd love to engage in this conversation more, help in any way. And I really have appreciated the time being here with you, Coach Jay. I think you're right. When you're engaged and enjoying the time, it does go by quickly.
It does. It went so fast. Stay with me. Ladies and gentlemen, I told you she was going to be outstanding. The book is outstanding, and she over delivered, and it was absolutely awesome. Fired Up, Guide to Transforming Your Team from Burnout to Engagement. Absolutely brilliant. Folks, it's the show. I tell you there's three things that you're in control of your entire life, and that's your attitude, your effort, and your resiliency. Life can be challenging, but you can make a choice to work on your attitude, to work on your effort, to work on your resiliency. Those are your choices. Take control of them, right? Because they're within your power. I'm going to be back next week with another great book. It's going to be another great guest who wrote that book. So that means it's going to be another great show. And as they say to you everywhere, all over the world, and you know what that is? Ciao, everybody.